Hey to you all, this is Father Roc O'Connor addressing the good folks from St. Catherine of Alexandria, St. Bernadette, and Our Lady of Good Hope. We're going to start talking about my book and what I propose to do in this thing with you. So I'm going to start with an overview of the introduction and then talk about chapter 1 and what I hope to do, and then talk about some of the means that I propose for having a grid in mind for thinking about this. It seems to me the question of dealing with the spiritual life is a key one these days. And what I perceive is that the basic question is always, how do I get from here to there? You know, like they say in Maine, you can't get that from here. That's what I hear they say in Maine. Love you people in Maine. The question of the spiritual life has to do with self-knowledge. And so I begin with this quote from St. Augustine from his Confessions. Late have I loved you, O beauty ever ancient, ever new. Late have I loved you. You were within me, and I was outside of myself. And it was there I sought you. And that's a key notion that Augustine proposes. I'll say a little bit more about Augustine later. But the deal is, Augustine is promoting a picture of seeking God out there. Seeking God in whatever. And he's he's reflecting on his own experience of going into and reflecting on his experience. And I believe to do a couple things. One is to discover where he's at, where he was, and what were the steps, what were the milestones, as it were, between where he was at and coming to his conversion. Often enough, I perceive that spiritual writers tell us what we should do, what we must do, what we have to do, what we need to do, what we ought to do to be like this. So in today's gospel, it was talking about Jesus saying, love your enemies. And we can go away from that saying, I should love my enemies. How does that help me get to love my enemies? It can set up a false ideal. Here's the ideal. And I focus, I should love my enemies out here. And it's possible that I could miss the fact that I'm back here saying, I despise my enemies. Were a person to go there and say, I despise my enemies, that can become a starting point. That can become a starting point not based upon what we should become like way down the road a piece, but on the beginning of the journey that I'm here, and my question then can become, what's my next right step? So that's a very key thing, and what I want to talk about in this book is finding ourselves situated with Bartimaeus as people of faith, as people who seek God, and yet are situated with him, blind, and often enough blind to who and where we are in our lives. And to sit with him through this study, as it were. He'll be our guide. He'll be become our next best friend, BFF and all that. So that's what I want to talk about here. Here's the second thing. What is there? So I want to get from here to there. Here's the classic story about St. Francis of Assisi that I believe is there. You could read about this. You could look them up on Google and find stories about Francis of Assisi embracing the leper. Francis had been at odds with his father, who wanted him to become a merchant. He had gone to war, was captured, one of those city-state things, I suppose, was captured and rotted in prison for a year, which meant two things. He had a lot of time to think about his life. And it meant that his father did not ransom him, but let him sit and stew in prison. And that's what he had a lot of stuff to think about. Who am I to be? Whom am I now? He had some encounters with God, and after he got out of prison, blah, blah, blah. And one day he's out riding along on his horse, musing about all this, as I recall the story. And he smells this beggar down the road a piece. He smells him and then sees him, and then the closer he gets more and more revolted and repulsed by this person. He rides past the leper. And he gets past the leper and says, wait a minute. There's something in the Gospels that speaks differently about that. What am I to do? In the past, he'd always ridden by the leper and got down the road a piece and then gave a bag of money to someone and said, go back and take it to the leper. Here he gets off his horse, goes back to the leper, gives him a bag full of money, embraces him and gives him the kiss of peace. Now, as I recall the legend, he goes and later has either a dream or a vision that was Christ. But the more amazing thing is that 2 weeks later, he moved in with the colony of lepers. Those whom he despised, he went to dwell with. And I think that's a good picture of there. In other words, one way to put it is, those whom I despise out there, like a leper, and avoid, are pictures of, remind me of what I despise in myself. If I can receive the grace to embrace the leper out there and within, wouldn't that change my life drastically? I'd be less afraid and a new person like Christ. So that's where I'm going to end with this introduction. I'm going to put up another video here right away about what does it look like in chapter 1. What's the grid through which I perceive, we human beings normally perceive the world. So I wish you well and happy journey on this.